Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be making peach marmalade jam. And I just wanted to start this video off by talking about purchasing bulk from your local farmer and how to get things for cheaper if possible, if you live in that kind of area. I understand that not everyone has access to agricultural land and farmers and bulk pricing and what have you, but those who do, you may be surprised what you can get for cost or even cheaper. And those who do live in the city, you might actually be surprised what you find within the realms of just outside of your city. As an example, my mom lives in a rather populated city, not far from us, a few hours from us, and you'd never think that there was a lot of agricultural land around, but she actually lives right next to a blueberry farm, and she told me the other day that the farmer does the blueberries for $2 a pound from the farm, and even less if you're one of his neighbors. So you never know what you're around and what you have access to. So I just wanted to kind of go over that here. Thankfully, I live in a region that has a lot of farmland, a lot of bulk pricing available to me and what have you. These are the peaches that I'm going to be canning, and as you can tell, they are gorgeous. Now, this ended up being about 18 pounds of peaches. We did two kinds of picking today. I went with my mom. She was in town visiting, and she did you pick off the tree, where I did windfall. Now, peaches in the actual market that we went to, and the market is on the same land as the farm itself, the peaches in the market were going for about $3.50 a pound. The pick your own peaches off the tree were $2 a pound. Windfall at that farm is always 20 cents a pound, which is just crazy, but they can't sell Windfall, so that's why it's so cheap. Now, my mom, for her 18 pounds, obviously, her boxes were about 16 pounds, but anyway, the math is going to get complicated, so let's keep it simple. Her boxes were about $30 a box or more. I think her larger box came to almost $38 a box. My box, drum roll please, came to $3.87 which is insane. Now, this is actually double layered even. You're just kind of looking at the top layer here. Now, with Windfall, you're always going to get peaches that are bruised or someone's taken a bite out of and thrown off the ground or is full of bugs. So obviously you don't take those. And I think that's what most people consider when they think of Windfall. They're like, oh, I'm not taking stuff off the ground. It's going to be disgusting. And that can be the case. So obviously you don't pick that. But especially with a farm that offers you pick, people go in there all the time and they're not really sure what they're doing, and they yard a fruit off the tree and then 3 others fall off the tree. And so sometimes you can go and there's no windfall, and sometimes you can go and there's crazy amounts. Like this particular farm, we had a really severe thunder and windstorm at the height of fruit season. And so the next day I went to the farm, and it was actually kind of sad because a lot of the branches had broken and there was just fruit all over the ground. But I must have gotten 40 pounds of peaches because my bill for them was about $7 and something. And that was what I canned all my peaches out of that year. And you do have to sometimes wait for them to ripen because they fall a little premature, or they ripen too quickly because they're bruised. So there is a bit more work when you're chopping off bruising or waiting for them to ripen. These ones in particular, I thought I'd actually be canning them today, or not canning them, jarring them, jam, but I am going to have to wait a bit. They are a little bit hard. We have a lot of sun where we are, obviously. It's quite warm, so I'm just going to lay them out, not double layered, but single layered, and let them ripen in the sun. But take a look at that. Like, how amazing is that peach? That looks perfect. That looks like, a $3.50 pound peach that you would get anywhere, where this whole box was $4. So, or $3.87 if you want to be specific. So I just wanted to jump on here before we start the canning and talk about ways you can get your fruit cheaper. A lot of people don't do canning and jamming anymore because it's just so expensive, and they can get it cheaper in the store. So why would you jar your own? But really, if you know what you're doing and you talk to your local farmer and you get to know your area, you can do this cheap. I'm going to put my bet here, and then we'll know when we're done jarring. I'm going to say 9 jars of jam. We're going to get, I'm going to say 9. 9 jars of jam, and maybe 1 with some leftovers we'll get out of this. So $3 over 9 jars of jam, obviously that's way cheaper than going to the store. Now I'm noticing this peach is maybe looking a little rough, so maybe we'll eat this one. but the majority of them, they're actually a little hard. They still need to ripen up a bit, which is perfect because I'm going to lay them out in the sun, and then we will probably tackle this maybe tomorrow or the next day in the evening. We'll actually do the jam then. So anyway, just want to start this video talking about how you can get fruit cheaper if you live in a region where you have local farms at your arm's reach there. And this is from my local farm. 18 pounds of peaches, just under $4. So you can do it. You can find the deals. Anyway, we'll be in the kitchen next. All right, welcome to the kitchen side of things. The video where I am holding the box of peaches, kind of explaining how I got them for so cheap, that was filmed on Monday. It is now Saturday. So you might ask me, how did you get those peaches to last all week long, especially if you pick them up off the ground? We're gonna go over that, but first I wanna go over my whole setup here. So what we're making today is peach marmalade, and I'm just gonna go over the basics of my canning supplies and kind of how I get everything set up before I get started, because canning really is a long, arduous process, and it's good if you can kind of get your kitchen ready to go so that when you're actually canning, you're just getting it done. So let's start over here. These are the basic tools of canning. You may have seen these before. We have a little magnetized grabber here for the lids. This is to pull them out of hot water. You may not see my lids or bands here, but I'm about to show them to you. The next is this guy. I'm really embarrassed to admit that I used it this way for the longest time before I really knew what I was doing. So I was grabbing lids like this, and I was like, why is it so slippery? This is the dumbest tool ever. And then my blonde moment, this is the side that you grab the lids with. So this is how you put your lids, or not your lids, but your jars in and out of your boiler. Vital tool for canning. The next one is a funnel. Now there's all kinds of different funnels. You may have seen one like this that's just simply plastic. This works fine. These kind of come in sort of those kits where it's like, hey, this is everything you need for canning, and they kind of throw everything in. Those are okay, but I do find if you can buy your supplies separately, you're going to get better quality and you're going to get what you want. This guy here I love because it's like a silicone and it collapses in, so it stores kind of flat, which is nice. And then just pops right out. The other thing I like about it too is sometimes I have wedged this and molded this in to kind of fit in a bit of a smaller jar. It doesn't work great, but it is a bit of a nice feature because it does help a little bit, where when you have a solid plastic, if it goes over the rim of the jar, it's not going to fit, and then you're dumping stuff everywhere. So I love this one. I actually love how wide it is as well. And I even use this for when I dehydrate. I put it over top of the Mylar bag and then dump things in. There you go. So those are kind of your three tools. Next I have my pot for my jam. This is a pretty big pot. It's not my favorite because it is quite a thinned bottom pot, and jam gets really, really hot. So I do feel a little stressed out about burning jam, but it's the biggest pot I have. You want a nice big pot. And we're actually going to be doing a triple batch today. So I'm probably going to be doing like one batch and then a double batch, just because I ended up with way more fruit than I thought. Then we have our actual canner. I have been heating this up already as I was doing some prepping, so it is warm, but it's not boiling. Jam does take quite a while to actually cook and get to the consistency it needs to be before you can jar it. And so when the jam is kind of stirring and we're working on it, that's when I'll bring this back up to a boil. I just don't want the added heat in my house right now. It is 7:30 in the morning. I've been up since 6:30, but I can already feel that the kitchen's getting kind of warm. So I kind of brought it to boil and then turned it off just so that it's hot but not boiling. Over here, we have our fruit and food items over here. So, before I get into that, lots of rags. You need so many rags for canning. We keep all of our rags in this bin, and I probably go through half of these when I do any type of canning, whether it be pickling or pressure canning or jam. So lots of clean rags, have them at the ready. Next, obviously, we've got our pectin. We're probably going to use 3 boxes today because, like I said, I've got about a triple batch just with the amount of fruit I have, so you want your pectin. Lots of sugar. I've got sugar ready to go here, a bag ready, and then this bowl actually has 9 cups of sugar in it because I thought it would be a double batch, but it's turned out to be a triple. We are doing peach marmalade today, so I do have a zest ready to go. This is a lemon zest and an orange zest. I did actually zest the fruit itself, but then I also have little pieces of orange in here as well that I just kind of chopped up just to give it that extra look and flavor. I did a peach marmalade last year. It was my first peach marmalade, and I don't think I zested it enough. After it sat for about a year, it had more of that like citrusy marmalade taste to it. But you know, usually we let it sit for a couple weeks and then we pull one off the shelf. And we found when we had it right away, it just more tasted like peach jam than anything. So I did kind of maybe go overboard on the zest and lemon, but I would actually rather err on the side of tart than on the side of just normal sweet peach jam. So this is our lemon zest. This will be enough for the 3 batches. I've essentially done like 1 lemon, 2 oranges per batch. So 1 batch of jam is going to be like 4 or 5 cups of fruit, a box of pectin, about 6 cups of sugar, which is a little insane. I usually cut back on the sugar a little bit, makes the jam a little runnier, but the sugar content is always so high. So this will be enough zest for all 3 batches, so we'll just kind of approach it from there. I then, last minute, we had someone at my work bring us a whole bunch of apricots. And we tried to pawn them off on all the staff members, but there was a ton left over, and then everyone was like, should I take it? Get rid of it? Can it? Make something? So I ended up with like 7 cups of apricots, which I was processing this morning, which is why I'm kind of starting a little later than I wanted to. I kind of wanted to be like making the actual jam at this point in the morning, but I had to process all these apricots. So we're going to throw this in today, which is why my jam has now turned into a triple batch. Apricots are very, very similar to peaches, so we're just going to throw it all in and put it all together. I think it's actually going to taste great. These apricots some of them are a little overripe and some of them are a little not quite underripe, but they don't have that sweetness to them yet. So I think it's going to add a nice balance to what we've got going on here. Peaches! Okay, so what I did is on Tuesday night, I chopped up that 18-pound box of peaches, because when you pick Windfall, you're kind of battling like, you know, you've got bruises on your peaches because they fell and hit the ground, but they're not quite fully ripe because they fell early. So there's this, you know, tough line of like the bruises are taking over, but you need the peach to ripen a little more. So I found kind of on Tuesday, I was like, you know what, these things need to be processed, but I did not feel like doing jam coming home Tuesday after work. And so what I did is I cut them all up and then I froze them in squares. Anytime you freeze fruit, especially juicy fruit, I would recommend doing something like this. Spread it out nice and thin, put it in your freezer flat, and then that way when you go to use it, just smash it and crack it, and then pull out the pieces that you need in order to cook it. We used to do frozen peaches all the time as a family, as a kid, for like Saturday morning waffles all throughout the winter. And when we froze peaches, we just froze them in like a big clump at the bottom of the bag, and then when you go to use it, you have to like defrost the entire thing in order to get any worth out of it. So what I've learned is to freeze things like this, or even better, in actual ice cube trays, and then when they're frozen, just crack them up out of their blocks, dump them into a bag, and then you've got a bunch of blocked fruit. And that, see, honestly, I'm like breaking this apart just even with my hands right now, right? So now I can dump it into my stock pot and jam it up. So always freeze your fruit flat like this. It also is a huge space saver when it comes to your freezer, because you can actually stack them and line them up in boxes. So I've got 3 bags of peaches. It's about 4 to 5 cups per bag. I think closer to 5, so that's what I'm going with, is 5. So we've got 15 cups of peaches. We've got 7 cups of apricots for a triple batch. And last thing I want to show you, this is like my pro tip. You may not be able to quite see it, but, well, you can actually, we're all right. This is how I sterilize my jars. Sterilizing jars is like my least favorite part of processing jam and anything really. It takes a ton of work. A lot of people use their actual water bath canner to sterilize jars, but I find this way better, way simpler, and you can do way more at a time. So all my jars are clean. And then what I do is I set my oven to 220 degrees, and I put all my jars on a cookie tray. And then what I do is I pour some boiling water into them to kind of steam them. And then they sit in the oven at 220 until I'm ready to use them. So water boils at roughly 220, and these are now at boiling temperature. So we're not going to have any jar breakage when we pour the jam into them and then transfer the jam to the stock pot. The other amazing thing about this is when you're doing double, triple batches, you obviously can't fit that many jars in your canner all at once. So you may, fill 7 and have 2 extra left over that don't fit. So if I have jars that don't fit in my canner but are like full of jam and ready to go, I put them back in the oven with their lids and bands on, and they just sit in the oven and wait for the next batch of water bath canning. So that's kind of like my pro tip here. And then underneath, we do have, you may not be able to see this, so I'll bring it up here. I do have my lids in a Pyrex container, and this was boiling water that went in here. So again, these are at boiling temperature essentially. Obviously it's going to cool off a little bit. It's not sitting in the oven physically boiling, but I find this to be the best and quickest way to keep my jars hot, keep them sterilized until I'm ready to go. And they've already been in there an hour, so like a jar in the oven for an hour at 220 is going to be pretty sterilized. So those are ready to go. At this point, we're going to start making the jam. We're going to dump everything in the pot. If you've never made jam before, there are processes for with pectin, without pectin, depending on if your pectin is powder or liquid. The quick process, I'll just run through it verbally, and then we'll kind of hit it up a little bit as we go. I won't make you watch every single step. We'll skip ahead. What we do first is we put all of our fruit in the stock pot, bring it to, bring one second. Put all of my fruit in the stock pot. We're going to take the cold out of it because it's frozen. So we're just going to bring it to a nice liquid. Once it's at that point, I will put the pectin in. If your fruit is not frozen, you can just dump it all in the pot, kind of give it a bit of a stir, and when it starts to create its own juice, put the pectin in. That's for powdered pectin, which is what we're doing today. If it's liquid pectin, you actually add it later. We then bring that whole fruit mix to a boil, and then we add all of our sugar. You then stir it until the sugar dissolves, and it then comes to a boil a second time. You then stir it at a rapid boil for 4 to 5 minutes as it thickens. You will also notice some foam comes to the top. You can kind of skim off that foam before you put it in your jars. When you start getting a decent amount of foam, that's kind of when you're coming to the end of your boiling phase. So that's essentially what we do. And again, it's going to be probably about an hour, especially if you're doing a double pot or double mix in this pot. I do find this pot does take a while to come to a boil, but it's really, really full. So that's why we're going to start with the first batch as a normal batch, which is probably what I'll film. I'll do the double batch on my own, and then we'll go from there. All right. Let's get started. Okay, so we've got about 5 cups of peaches, 2.5 cups-ish of apricots, and then we've got our lemon zest in there, which it does bring it about to around 8 cups, which is the recommended batch for peach jam. And then we're going to just bring this down a little bit, let it kind of dissolve its clumps, and at that point we'll add the pectin. Okay, we are almost fully thawed out, so I'm going to add the pectin in there. You would essentially just add the pectin right away if your fruit has not been frozen. So we're just going to stir that in. I can hear it actually is getting a little hot on the bottom, so I think this is going to come to boil fairly quickly. And then once it starts boiling, we will add our sugar. I'm actually so happy with the consistency of this already, and I don't feel like it's going to need as much sugar as it originally calls for because it's not as juicy as I was anticipating. So it's calling for 6 cups of sugar to 8 cups of fruit. I think I might knock that back to even 5 or 4 cups. Again, it might tend for a bit of a runnier jam, but because this is already looking fairly thick, I think we can pull it off. Okay, we are drinking coffee and stirring jam. We're not quite at the boiling point to add the sugar, but you know what? I didn't say this because I actually didn't think I would need it, but the original recipe for peach jam called for about half a cup of water, and I was like, I don't know, these are pretty juicy peaches. I really don't think I'm going to need that water. But this is turning out to be so thick that I think it could actually use a little bit of liquid to thin it out. So what I did is instead of using water, I actually juiced a whole orange and put that in. So we're not quite a half cup of liquid, but we are just a little bit more liquidy than we were without it. And because we are marmalade, I thought that orange juice would add just a little bit of a nice zest to it as well. Super happy with the consistency, but I just thought I would say that You know what? I think half a cup of water in your peaches before you bring to a boil would be beneficial. But because we're doing marmalade, I just did orange juice. We'll see how that turns out. Okay, we are ready for our sugar. It is boiling a little bit. Look at that consistency. That just looks fantastic, and it smells so yummy. That was a mistake I made the first time I did this, is not putting in enough zest, and I can definitely smell the zest in oranges, and it smells fantastic. So we're gonna start with 4 cups of sugar here, and then we're gonna go from there. The measuring cup I'm using is actually a 1.5 cup measure, which is kind of nice. My grandma bought them for me. I don't even know where you would buy them, to be honest, but I love it. So we're doing about 4 cups of sugar here. We're gonna stir that in, see how that looks. We will add more if needed, but we'll just get all that guy in there. So the sugar will thin it out, but then it will also thicken it. So you can see it is getting a little more watery. Don't panic. And then essentially what we're doing now is we're bringing it to a boil and thickening it with the sugar. This is where jamming gets really intense, because you have to stir it at a rapid boil for 4 to 5 minutes, which I probably won't film, because you have to stay pretty focused, especially if your pot is prone to burning. So you can see we definitely have a lot more liquid. You can see kind of the fruit separating a little bit more. That's all really normal. At this point, we're just bringing it to a boil and getting it to thicken again. I may put a little bit more sugar in there. I'm not sure. I'm kind of happy with how it's looking. So we have done 4 cups of sugar, 4-ish as of right now. Okay, we are done our sweaty, boiling, stirring. See how it looks kind of glassy? I don't know if the steam is fogging that up too much there, and the fruit has really separated from the juice. That's really what you're looking for. When you hit that sort of glossy texture in boiling, that's when you're done. So it was just under 4 minutes of boiling, and I actually stopped it a bit early. So they say 4 to 5 minutes. I think it is more 4 minutes, but that's the consistency I want right there. It is good to let your jam sit and rest before you jar it. So this is when we're going to be pulling our jars out and prepping them, and then we'll fill them up. Okay, we're going to start filling our jars. I've pulled 6 jars out of the oven. I actually don't think I'm even going to fill all 6. I think it might be closer to 5. And so jars are hot, lids are hot, pans are hot, everything's hot. And we're going to just spoon our marmalade right in. You do want to kind of get an even consistency when you're pulling your jam out, because the fruit and the liquid has somewhat separated. You don't want some jars too liquidy and some jars just full of fruit. So do make sure you try and get a nice even spread of everything in the jar. And we're filling about 1 inch head space, which with your standard mason jars is right at that nice rim. So we're going to fill them all, and then we are going to just wipe the rims down. This is again where your lots of clean rags come in. You can just use water. You can put a little vinegar on the rag for sanitization purposes if you just want that little bit of added protection. I usually just use water. If I'm pressure canning, I will use vinegar and water. We might actually get a little more than 5 jars here. I'm impressed. See where this goes. These funnels really make for a nice process. I'm being a bit sloppy, but the funnel itself kind of takes the mess out of it. Wow, we are getting a lot more jam than anticipated. I think my original guess was 9 jars of jam, but with the added apricots, we are going to get way more, which I'm not sad about because the peach marmalade turned out to be our favorite. So I'm not sad to have an abundance of this, but I think the 3 batches is going to be not excessive for us, but maybe excessive for some households. We are hitting 5 jars. That was my guess. So we were 8 cups of fruit, 1 pack of pectin, probably about 5 cups of sugar in the end, and 1 lemon, 2 oranges, and that's about it. So I've got 5 jars here, which is not enough for me to fill my canner. So I'm actually going to put the lids and bands on these and stick them in the oven, and then I'm going to do my next batch, and when I have enough jars to actually fill the canner, that's when we'll put them in, which is the really nice benefit of keeping your oven going while you can. Okay, here we are after the first round of bath bathing the jars. Wow, I'm tired. The double batch went really good. The only thing that did not so good is it was much higher in the pot, which left very little room between the jam and my hands, and I got burned a couple times. So that's kind of what you sign up for when you do jam. We got, drumroll please, 14 jars of jam out of all of that. We did get a little jar that is not quite full, so we'll put that in the fridge. It is quite liquidy. I am hoping this sets up a bit more. It might not, but like I said, because I was doing a little less sugar, I did wonder if it was, ooh, ding. I did wonder if it would be a little more liquidy. I am okay with that. The ones that go in the water bath will set up a little bit more just because they have a little bit more heat to them. So this is it. We did it. I did want to make a little bit of correction. I did say that in the batch there was 5 cups of fruit. Obviously that was closer to 7.5 cups of fruit with the apricots. My original guess with that 18-pound box of peaches was that we would get roughly 9 jars of jam out of it. And I think I would have been spot on if we didn't add the apricots. The apricots pushed it over to 14 jars, which is amazing. If you kind of track how much you use throughout the year, that'll give you a good idea as to how much you should can all at once. I typically like a jar a month, so this gives us a jar a month plus a couple to give away. I also did a Saskatoon berry jam earlier in the month. I didn't record that because I wasn't quite set up for it yet. So with the Saskatoon jam, with this jam, with leftover jam from previous years, we are jam rich. So I hope you like this video. I hope you try it yourself. Comment below if you do. Comment, let me know what other types of recipes or jams, jellies, canning, I do pressure canning, you'd like to see. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I am a new channel trying to start out, and there's lots of competition when it comes to homesteading. So hopefully you like this, and hopefully you share it with friends. Thanks guys, and we will catch you on the next one.